So if we start with taking a look at what Elixir is, so the what, how, why. So Elixir, different people can interpret it in different ways, but fundamentally, Elixir is a European life science data infrastructure. Legally, it's an intergovernmental consortium as well. But that probably doesn't tell you much about how Elixir works, so how we operate in practice. And we do this by bringing together networks of experts. They could be experts from a country in a node, and you'll hear Irena talking about Elixir Germany. They could be experts in a particular theme, like proteomics, or in a community focus group. So we've got lots of different mechanisms to bring people together as well. So individual opportunities to connect with experts. And then our partners provide services as well. So they run Elixir services and resources that external scientists can access and benefit as well. So that's one of the main purposes of Elixir, to take services run by the Elixir community and try to ensure that they are adopted by scientists across the globe. And that's really the purpose that we want to achieve with Elixir, trying to bring some sustainability to the distributed infrastructure. And why do we do this? Why is it that our partners are the bioinformaticians, the data management experts, the software developers that are running services? Why is it that we try to bring them together and coordinate these activities? Well, it's really so that life scientists in general can benefit from those services. And in turn, that can help to accelerate life science research and its translation to new knowledge and science and society as well. So that's a very high level summary of the what, how, and why of Elixir. And over the next few slides, we'll talk you through how this works in practice, introduce you to some of the terms and organizational structures that you might have come across, but not necessarily understood or wondered how they worked. So let's look now at who is part of Elixir. So firstly, Elixir is very, very diverse, and that is a really important point to note here. There are lots of different experts from across Elixir nodes that are actively contributing to activities. They include bioinformaticians, general data scientists, node coordinators. Um, so they also include IT experts, administrators, trainers. So we have a whole host of individuals, and that's probably represented by those of you who joined the call as well, across our partnering organizations that are involved in trying to provide some of the resources and services that are part of Elixir. And then if we look at this in terms of the organizations as well, and that's also important. The structure of Elixir is based on national nodes. So each country brings together its national community by hosting an Elixir node. EMBL, which I'll mention in a moment, is different because it's a European organization and that also has its own node. But the national structure of Elixir is really, really important because those nodes typically bring together many different research institutes and universities in that country to provide bioinformatics services as well. So most of them are actually a larger network of 10, 15, 20 different universities or research institutes in each respective country. And that's why the scale of Elixir is quite large. So over those 22 countries, we've got over 250 institutes that are involved. And obviously, the individuals who are active in Elixir come from one of those institutes that are part of an Elixir node. But of course, and I'll mention later when I talk about some of the stakeholders of Elixir, the reason why Elixir is connecting experts from nodes is so that they can provide services and resources to the external user community as well. So hopefully that gives you a little idea about who is typically part of Elixir. And given the type of organization we are, you can see that it encompasses lots of different roles, different expertise. And of course, we have different means and mechanisms to help connect these different type of profiles together as well. The question that usually always comes up is for when people first start to get connected to Elixir or view it from the outside, is the relationship between Elixir, EBI, and EMBL. So over the next two slides, I'll try to dissect that and give you a very easy summary of how this works in practice. So for those of you who don't know, EMBL is the European Molecular Biology Laboratory. That's an intergovernmental organization with headquarters in Heidelberg in Germany. And one of the sites of EMBL, because it has 6 sites spread over different countries, one of them is EBI, so the European Bioinformatics Institute in Kingston, and that provides many of the large databases, um, training services, and also carries out bioinformatics research as well. So it's a large institute that is one of the sites of EMBL, and that's based in Kingston. And that's also where the Elixir Hub is based as well. And the Elixir Hub has the role of trying to coordinate Elixir across its member states. And if we think of the nodes in Elixir, we have EBI, which is a European node, and then we have national nodes as well. And you'll hear, as I've mentioned, from Denby, from Elixir Germany, from Irena in a moment. So that's really what we're trying to do, help to connect national nodes across Europe and ensure that they are connected also to the European Bioinformatics Institute as well. So that's how those 3 organizations fit together. And also just to go a little bit deeper into this as well. So I've already mentioned how EBI is a node of Elixir, but it's the only node which isn't a national node because it's part of EMBL, which is a European organization. Now, EMBL also acts as the legal host of the Elixir Hub as well. So when Elixir coordinates EU projects, we're doing it inside the framework of EMBL. Okay, so those of you who are involved in some of our EU projects might have recognized that legally it's part of EMBL because it's EMBL that gives its legal personality to Elixir and allows it to be established as an intergovernmental organization as well. However, governance and budgets are completely ring-fenced between EMBL, which has its own member states, and between Elixir. Okay, so the member states of Elixir provide a financial contribution, and that's implemented through our scientific program, which I'll mention in a moment. So governance, decisions, scientific implementation, they're all completely separate between Elixir and EMBL. And then for those of you who have been involved in or who might be aware of the history of Elixir, you might know that Dame Professor Janet Thornton originated the concept of Elixir, including with partners, when she was the director of EBI. This is probably about 15 years ago now, and it was really done because it was impossible for any one organization to manage the data deluge. And it was recognized even then that there needed to be some level of coordination across Europe that allowed member states to build up their own national data capacities, their expertise, their skills, and being able to manage data within that country as well. And if you want more questions, if you have further questions on this, we can answer them at the end. And I'll also point you to the governance FAQ linked here as well. And the slides will be made available afterwards. So I mentioned how when a country becomes a member of Elixir, so that's the ministries of science, they transfer a budget to the headquarters based on the net national income of that country. And the activities that are described over the 5-year period are in what's known as the scientific program. So that's really like a long-term vision of what will happen in the scientific technical areas of Elixir over the period, in this case, of 2024 to 2028. So that's how Elixir operates in practice. And a lot of the activities that you might be involved in or would like to get involved in are probably part of commission services. And I'll explain that in a moment because these are quite important mechanisms to understand. And then the scientific program also gives context for us to engage in EU projects as well. So we describe the areas of scientific importance to Elixir in our program. And then with partners, we take part in EU-funded applications as well. So just to let you know that the scientific program for 2024 was published at the beginning of this year, and it's a really good document that gives you an idea about the scope and scientific focus of all of the areas of Elixir. So it's interesting to look at how Elixir is funded. and that also helps to explain structure and how Elixir operates in practice. So we have a node in each country, and it's those nodes themselves that run the services. So there's probably 500 services, more than that, in Elixir: databases, software tools, training courses, standards, compute facilities, data management expertise. So they are provided by the nodes, and the nodes themselves get funding through multiple different streams. So sometimes they get national funding as a result of being part of Elixir from their national funders. Sometimes they have to submit competitive research funding applications. Sometimes they might collaborate with industry, or they might use EU structural funds for certain regions, or they might get funding from charitable foundations as well. So there's a lot of different mechanisms and channels that nodes can use to try and access funding. At the level of the Elixir Hub, we manage the budget that's provided by the Elixir member states, and as much of that as possible goes on commissioned services, and they go to connect and help to coordinate the services run by Elixir partners. So that's the real instrument of Elixir that helps to connect activities. So it's quite possible that many of you are involved or have been involved in the past in commission services. And that's the mechanism we use to try and it's really Elixir in practice. So how we can fund partners to work together on projects. So let's take a look at commission services a little bit more deeply. They are projects where budget is transferred to individuals and institutes in Elixir nodes to work together. Now, they might be connecting services together. They might be trying to work out a vision for Elixir in a particular area or scientific domain or area of technology as well. And so over the course of the last two scientific programs, we funded over 120 commission services that help connect partners and experts together as well. And obviously in this new scientific program, there's already been a tranche of commission service projects that have started and a set of open calls as well. But also even throughout the rest of the scientific program, there will be new commission services opening, and there are also schemes that enable you to work on staff exchange projects, international collaborations, and also partnering with industry as well. So that's a really important link for you to follow here to the commission service guidelines if you want to understand how they work and look at how to get involved in them, because it's the glue of Elixir, these commission services. But at the same time, we also work on EU funded projects as well. So there are lots of Horizon Europe projects that Elixir partners take part in, connecting research infrastructures, working on the European Open Science Cloud, and even things in the Digital Europe program around the 1 million genomes and EU for Health as well. So collectively, there's a lot of EU funded projects that Elixir partners are working on, and that in turn adds to well, I would say it's a real driver for institutes to become involved in Elixir. But the fact that there are internally funded projects through commission services, there are services run by nodes, and there are EU funded projects makes the landscape complex, because sometimes there are multiple projects that are touching on the same themes, which means that is always a big challenge to help keep these coordinated. I think it's always important to look at stakeholders, okay? And this slide gives you an idea about the scale of the different organizations that could be stakeholders of Elixir. So the hub is one organization, 50 members of staff, but the nodes themselves, and there are 22 Elixir nodes, they bring together over 250 institutes. So even the scale of national coordination, which I'm sure Irena will mention, is a challenge, trying to make sure that partners are connected, kept up to date, that you can exchange good practice internationally as well. But the reason nodes exist is so that users, and this could be in universities, research institutes, companies, they can access the bioinformatics services that the nodes provide. And then we also have a very important stakeholder group of funders. So they might be providing national funding. It could be the European Commission. It could be the Elixir board. And obviously we need to make sure that we understand the needs of our funders, because they're usually spending taxpayers' money on nodes so that nodes can support this large user community. And we also have a set of collaborators. They could be international partners. They could be bioinformatics communities in particular countries outside Elixir, or they could be other European research infrastructures as well. And what this means is that there's a very strong interface between Elixir nodes and users. So if you're running training courses in a node, or if you're running a database or a workflow, for example, you'll probably have a good understanding of your user base. And it's the same with collaborators as well. It could be another research infrastructure that might need Elixir's expertise in data management. So we always need to think about is the stakeholder, so the individual or the organization, are they part of Elixir and therefore can take part in commission services? Or are they outside Elixir, in which case the activity should still be bringing some benefit to them in the long term, because that's the only way to ensure that we get sustainable funding from funders, because they want to make sure that there's an impact and benefit to users. So a few points on operational structures here. You might have heard the term platform used. And the first point to note here, if you're very new to Elixir, it's not a computing environment or a technology. It's not a piece of software in the traditional sense where you might go to, say, upload data or analyze data. In Elixir, platforms are operational structures. We use them to bring together experts in Elixir nodes on a particular theme like compute or training or interoperability. And those experts will develop a scientific and technical vision for what Elixir needs to do in one of those corresponding areas. So we have 5 platforms, but they're really operational structures to bring together experts. We also have a lot of mechanisms to bring together different Elixir groups. So we have something called communities. We have 17 of those, and these are in more thematic areas, including, say, plant sciences or 3D bioinfo. And if we think of Elixir, we need to bring value by bringing experts together. So, and the area of Elixir is very broad. So we do that by bringing people together in these domain-specific communities. They have a longer term duration and they can include experts from outside Elixir as well. You might have also heard of focus groups. Now, these are shorter term in nature. They include things like the European Open Science Cloud Focus Group on machine learning. They're open for anyone from inside Elixir to join, but also external partners. But then they're less of a permanent structure in that they are intended to be created for a specific purpose, maybe to write a report, make some recommendations, and then if that served its purpose, that focus group would end. But there are also other coordination groups as well that exist, like node coordinators or groups that bring together Elixir communication experts as well. And these are much more operational in nature, sharing best practice, trying to address challenges. So we've got a lot of different groups, and we appreciate that if you're new to Elixir, finding out what's happening can be difficult. The website is a way of helping you, and we're always available to answer questions as well. But the point here is that there are lots of these networks that allow you to work with experts in other countries, but they sometimes have slightly different names between communities, focus groups as well. And then just to remind you of the fact that our nodes in Elixir provide the services. And when a node is created, the services that it would be offering to the community, whether that's databases or training or compute, that's described in what's known as a service delivery plan. That's an annex of a collaboration agreement signed between the Elixir Hub and the Elixir node. And that gives us the basis to transfer budget to Elixir nodes as well. So there are over 500 services in Elixir overall. Most of them are free of charge. A small number of them have a charge associated with them, typically for computing facilities. And to make it easier to find what you're looking for, there are often recommendations made. So, for example, if you don't know where to put data, you could look at the Elixir deposition database list to find out where to put your experimental data. Okay, so just coming to the end now, and I can see that we've got a lot of questions coming in. I don't propose to answer them as I go through because I think there's going to be time at the end for that, David. So I'll continue the slides, but just to note that we recognize that I'm sure we've got some great questions coming in. And I think one of the take-home messages to think of is that Elixir is really about bringing people together. And we have different ways of doing that. I've mentioned some of the platforms, the communities. Well, in practice, how do you get information about them? How do you contribute to them as well? So we try to have an open, collaborative way of working in Elixir, which we want you to contribute to and we want you to benefit from as well. So in most of the meetings that we have, we'll always try, if it's a working group meeting, we'll always try to have collaborative note taking through Google Docs, for example, and encourage the link to the Google Doc to be added to the agenda so that people can find it even if they're not in the meeting as well. So there's a lot of things you can see here that we really want to try and enable, which in turn helps knowledge transfer so that scientists in the long run can get the benefit of this as well. Just to briefly finish with, you probably wonder why some terms in Elixir have capital letters. We try to limit this, but there are certain things where it really does help. So the word community, if we're talking about the scientific community in general, it would be lowercase c. But if we're talking about the Elixir proteomics community, that's capitalized. Okay. So if it has a specific meaning to Elixir, it will be in capital letters like community, platform, or service as well. But we have to appreciate that sometimes these are confusing for partners outside Elixir. And also, we have to appreciate that because Elixir is funded through so many different projects and initiatives nationally and at the European level, lots of acronyms get used as well. And we need to make sure that we're careful in when these are used because not everyone will understand them. So that's a plea to everyone involved in Elixir. Let's be careful when we're using acronyms because not everyone will know them. And then some really important resources for you. And I would encourage you to take a look at the Handbook of Operations if you've got an active role in Elixir node. So this is updated regularly. The latest version was updated in May, so it's very fresh. It's publicly available and the link is available here. And then also via the Elixir intranet, which you can log into and get an access to a lot of these reference documents that I've mentioned, templates for slides. You can find people. So that's a really important resource for you to use as well. And then finally, before I pass to Irina, this webinar now builds from a session that happened at the all hands meeting, but the theme of onboarding is obviously very important. It's something we know we need to get good at doing because there are always so many new partners, organizations that are connecting to Elixir. And so this slide summarizes the different activities that all relate somehow to onboarding and which projects they're happening in. Some of them are just starting, like the 2 new commission services for People Pulse and Train the Trainer. And some of them are happening through EU projects like Elixir Steers as well. But this is just to recognize that there are a lot of different activities that we want to work on over the coming years to try and make it easier for people to connect to Elixir and try to navigate the complexity. I think with that, I will hand over to you now, Irina, and you're going to give us a practical use case from Elixir Germany.
Yes, thank you very much, Andy. So my name is Paul, Node Coordinator and Deputy Head of German Node, and I am based in Research Center Jülich. So thank you for your kind introduction, Andy, and for invitation. It's my pleasure to present you today an example of onboarding process from a node perspective. And that being said, I will do this on my node. So next slide. Yeah, I am a member of Elixir Germany, and Elixir Germany is the national node of the European Elixir infrastructure since 2016. Until 2021, the node was operated as a collaborative project supported by the German Federal Ministry of Education and Research. Back in 2022, the ministry decided to provide permanent funding for Elixir Germany. By doing so, we moved to Research Center Jülich as a part of Helmholtz Association of German Research Centers, which has been tasked with consolidating and restructuring of the network. The process resulted in new contractual obligations and, of course, staff turnover. Yes, next slide. Yeah, however, by 2024, the node has expanded to include 24 partners from German institutions and university. And as you can see it on the map on the left side, we are spread all over the country. Our representing entity is Research Center Jülich, and the partners itself are organized in 8 thematic service units dedicated to the topics like human bioinformatics, microbial bioinformatics, plant bioinformatics, RNA, proteomics and lipidomics, integrative bioinformatics, databases, systems biology, and data management. Yeah, next. How do we practically work? So I'm not going to spend many time to explain our also complex organization. Let me briefly summarize that the node revolves around ELIXIR communities shown on the right side of this picture, and being ELIXIR board, head of a node committee, groups like node coordinators, training coordinators, technical coordinators, I guess names were already mentioned by Andy. We also work in ELIXIR platforms, communities, and focus groups, of course. Our representing entity, as mentioned previously, is Forschungszentrum Jülich, and Jülich employs our head of node, Oliver Kohlbacher from Tübingen University, and Alexander Trüber from Research Center Jülich. The node also has the administration office responsible for node management and work in ELIXIR groups like node coordinators, training coordinators, technical coordinators group, and ELIXIR platform. Lastly, we have also experts in our service units, so-called team ELIXIR officers responsible for good communication to our members in the network, and responsible for active engagement in ELIXIR. Next slide. In the next few minutes, I would like to talk about this group, what I am coordinating, and where I experience personal changes due to the restructuring process, and where I started to do onboarding. Yes, next. So a few words about the team ELIXIR officers. The team was funded in 2020 and comprises bioinformatics experts from our service units with different focuses in bioinformatics and computational biology, and these groups support the node with no specific activities. We meet virtually every 6 weeks, and we also do have a face-to-face event once a year, where we simply exchange information and cultivate our collaboration at the national level, but of course also at the European level. As I mentioned previously, due to the restructuring process itself, I experienced fluctuation in this group, and back in 2022, I started to do onboarding for newcomers to this group. Next. By onboarding new members, I basically focused on 3 main goals. So my aim was to ensure new members understand the complex organizational structure and culture of ELIXIR. I also aim to provide clarity on roles, on responsibilities and expectations. And by doing onboarding, I fostered connections and collaboration within the network and tried to link newcomer with partners in our network. The onboarding process itself was divided in 2 phases, in 2 segments. The pre-arrival preparations, basically welcome package, if you like, welcome email with essential information about the German node, about the checklist, and I also asked new members to register for national newsletter, ELIXIR Weekly, and Slack. And the second segment, most interesting one, is of course the onboarding meeting itself, which was also divided in 3 parts. Next slide, Andy. Thank you. So the onboarding meeting, or the initial segment of onboarding, focuses of general information, general overview of ELIXIR. So by doing so, I outline usually the brief history and the mission and vision of ELIXIR Europe, I also explain the hub nodal model, what are the platforms, communities, basically what Andy did a few minutes ago, and I literally navigate my colleague through the ELIXIR Europe website. By doing so, I smoothly transitioned to ELIXIR Germany and explained how we organize as a German member of ELIXIR Europe at national level. I introduced new partner to our national infrastructure, being German Network for Bioinformatics Infrastructure, called DENBI, and explain what kind of services we are offering to the life science communities, being also tools, training, cloud, DENBI Cloud, and Industrial Forum in our case. Next. Moving forward, I also explained to a new member how to be engaged in ELIXIR. And by doing so, I do basically virtual tour of ELIXIR's project, being commission services and capacity building and knowledge exchange programs. So we already heard about the commission services, here during the onboarding process, I outlined the structure, the timeline, the thematic focuses of these commission services, and also announced the upcoming open calls. And the same applies for capacity building and knowledge exchange programs, being staff exchange, travel grants, for example. If the partners are aiming to participate in ELIXIR meetings, they might use the travel grant scheme here. Yes, next. Last but not least, we spoke about the specific role of new member, and we set expectations in next steps in that case. And to be able to do so, I developed a profile sheet shown on the right side. It divided basically in 3 columns dedicated to the topics like activities in ELIXIR, current tasks in ELIXIR, and work plan for the upcoming year of the new person. We were filling in these sheets jointly, and by doing so, set expectation and next steps, basically. Yeah, next slide. That's it. Of course, there are lessons learned so far, and definitely a room for improvement. From the onboarding I did over the last 2 years, I clearly understand that the ELIXIR infrastructure is very complex, and it is beneficial for newcomer to understand this infrastructure, to better navigate and integrate, and also to put their experience to better use in ELIXIR. I also aim to provide ongoing onboarding meetings, because I definitely learned that initial onboarding is very important, but the people still have urgent and important questions. And for this reason, ongoing onboarding should take place in Germany. Also, tailored training, so mentoring might be important for individual roles or for individual needs. And I'm also thinking about to implement that in Germany. And maybe surveys and feedback sessions to get also feedback how we can improve the onboarding process in the future. Yep, next slide. This is my last slide. So that being said, the onboarding practices are task in new commission service called People Pulse. People Pulse stands for Driving Personal and Professional Growth with Strategic Programs in ELIXIR. This commission service, this project is coordinated by Mariana de Freitas from Portugal Note and myself, with the aim to provide best practices and transfer know-how and equip individuals to excel their roles within the ELIXIR community. We basically aim to offer our training programs to middle management and operational staff in ELIXIR, and integrate best practices in those groups. Very important part of People Pulse is the streamlined onboarding process, which should be developed in this project. Next slide, Andy. This is the conceptual framework of People Pulse based on 5 work packages. I am not going to explain each of them. Important to you to mention that the onboarding practices will happen in work package 2, led by Lisana Paladin and Isabella Paredes Sinceros. Both ladies are joining us today, so hello, ladies. Lisana and Isabella and the team aim to enhance the understanding of ELIXIR among newcomers and, of course, promote the active involvement. They plan to develop guidelines and produce and disseminate videos explaining ELIXIR activities, and also aim to provide regular meetings to onboard new people using ELIXIR Germany and ELIXIR Spain nodes as a pilot project in this case. I think I finished. Yes, thank you very much for your comments, and I'm happy to take any questions.